I stopped at the diner because I didn't trust myself to drive the last 10 minutes home on nothing but nerves. It was one of those places off the highway with fogged windows and a bell over the door that sounded tired. The air smelled like coffee that had been reheated too many times and fried onions that had seeped into the walls over the years. I slid into a booth near the back, kept my coat on, and opened the folder I'd been carrying like it was a life raft. 2 weeks. That's all I had until the hearing. 2 weeks until my sister, Paige, stood in front of a judge and tried to convince the court I was some kind of predator who had manipulated our grandmother. 2 weeks until my parents sat behind her and nodded along like it hurt them to do it, while still doing it. They had chosen her version of reality years ago, and they had never once asked for mine. The waitress set a mug down in front of me. "You okay, honey?" I nodded, just tired. She gave me the kind of look that says everyone in here is tired, and walked away. I took one sip of coffee and tried to reread my notes from my attorney meeting. Short sentences, plain language, nothing dramatic. Probate hearing, emergency petition. Paige requesting removal of executor claim, undue influence/elder exploitation. Ask freeze accounts plus appoint Paige. If the judge granted it, I wouldn't just lose control of Grandma's estate. I'd lose the ability to protect it from the one person who had been trying to get her hands on it since the funeral. I was staring at the word freeze when I heard a chair scrape near the front. A man's voice, low and embarrassed, floated across the diner. "I'm sorry," he said. "It must be a mistake. I have money. I looked up. An older man stood at the counter with his hands resting on the edge like he needed something solid to hold him up. He wasn't dressed like someone trying to impress anyone. Dark slacks, a simple jacket, hair combed neatly, face clean-shaven. His cheeks were red, the way they get when humiliation comes out of nowhere. A waitress was holding a little receipt book, glancing toward the manager like she didn't want to make this worse but didn't know how else to end it. "Sir," she said quietly, "your card declined." The man swallowed hard. Can I try again?" She did. The machine beeped again. He nodded like he'd expected the second beep, like his body had already accepted the shame before his mind could. A couple in a booth nearby went silent. A teenager at the counter stared. So the manager, a thick-armed man with a clipped beard, came out from the kitchen wiping his hands on a towel like this was about to become a scene. "Everything okay?" the manager asked, voice too loud for the moment. The older man's shoulders tightened. "It's not okay. I'm sorry. My bank must have... I can call..." The manager sighed, half impatient, half tired. "Sir, we can't just..." The man's hands shook slightly as he pulled his wallet back out. Not because he didn't have money, because being watched while you fail does something to your hands. I didn't think about it. I didn't run it through a moral debate. I stood up, walked to the counter, and set my card down next to the receipt. "I've got it," I said. The older man turned toward me, startled. "Oh, no, you don't..." "It's fine," I said, and kept my voice gentle because he looked like he'd break if anyone pushed him one more inch. The waitress hesitated, eyes flicking between me and him. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Just add it." The manager softened immediately, because people always soften when the problem stops being theirs. "Appreciate you," he muttered. The older man's eyes were glossy now, not with tears, but with the effort of holding them back. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I can reimburse you. This is humiliating." "I know," I replied, and I meant it. "It happens." It wasn't a lie. Cards get declined. Banks throw fraud holds. Systems glitch. Pride doesn't care. The receipt printed. The waitress slid it toward me to sign, and I wrote my name without thinking how weird that was. Then I did the only thing that felt clean. I picked up my folder, nodded once at the older man, and walked out before he could force gratitude into a moment that didn't need it. Outside, the air was cold enough to wake me up. I stood beside my car for a second with my keys in my hand, letting my breathing settle. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Paige's lawyer says you'll be embarrassed in court. Don't make this harder. No, how are you? No, we miss you. Just a warning wrapped in a command, the way they always spoke to me now. I didn't answer. I got in my car and drove home, the diner's neon shrinking behind me in the rearview mirror. That night, I barely slept. Not because of the diner, because I kept hearing the word freeze in my head, like a threat, like a promise. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse with my folder tucked under my arm and my throat tight in a way I refused to show. The hallway smelled like rain-soaked coats and copier toner. My shoes clicked on tile. Every sound felt too sharp. Paige was already at counsel table, perfectly composed, whispering to her attorney like she was the one being wronged. My parents sat behind her in the gallery, close enough to be seen as her backup. Avoiding my eyes like looking at me might force them to remember they were my parents too. Paige's attorney stood when the judge entered and said, "Your Honor, this is a simple emergency petition to protect the estate." Simple. That word again. The one people use when they want to erase the damage behind paperwork. I took my seat, hands folded, and waited for the judge to look up. He did. And the second his eyes landed on my face, his posture changed, subtle but immediate. And he stared at me like he'd reached into a memory he hadn't expected to find in this room. Then he glanced down at the case file, back up at me, and said my name aloud. "Ms. Morgan." The room went silent, because the judge was the same older man from the diner. And now he was sitting above everyone, robe on, eyes steady, looking at me like he'd just realized something the rest of the room hadn't. The judge didn't stare at me for sympathy. He stared like he was doing the one thing courts are built to do: separate what's true from what's convenient. Then he cleared his throat and looked down at the docket again, as if forcing himself back into procedure. "Before we proceed," he said, "I'm going to make a disclosure for the record." Paige's lawyer straightened like he'd been waiting for that line. My sister tilted her chin up, suddenly confident again, as if the universe had finally handed her the angle she needed. The judge continued, calm and measured. "Approximately 2 weeks ago, I was at a public diner and had an interaction with Ms. Morgan. She paid for my meal after my card declined." A murmur rippled through the room, quick, then swallowed, because nobody wants to be the person who makes noise in front of a judge. Paige's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, we move for recusal." Of course he did. My parents' heads snapped toward him as if he'd just produced a miracle. Paige's mouth curved into a thin smile, the kind that says, "I knew it. I knew she was shady." My stomach tightened, but I didn't move. I didn't even blink too fast. I'd learned that the moment you look panicked, someone uses it as proof. The judge didn't look offended. He looked tired. "Counsel," he said, "you may state your basis." Paige's attorney spread his hands like he was being reasonable. An undisclosed financial interaction between the court and the respondent creates an appearance issue. My client is entitled to a neutral tribunal. The judge nodded once, as if he agreed with the principle. Then he said something I didn't expect. "That is precisely why I am disclosing it," he replied. "And it is precisely why I am addressing it now." He turned slightly toward the clerk. "Clerk, note that this was a public transaction, unsolicited, and I did not know Ms. Morgan's identity at the time." Then his gaze returned to Paige's lawyer. "Counsel, do you have any evidence of bias beyond the existence of a diner receipt?" Paige's lawyer opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there wasn't anything. There was just a story he wanted to build. Bribery by omelet. The judge leaned forward a fraction. "For the record, I attempted to reimburse Ms. Morgan the next day through the diner's management, and the diner declined to accept payment twice due to their policy. I then donated an equivalent amount to the county legal aid fund and have documentation available for the file." My sister's smile faltered. My father's shoulders stiffened behind her. My mother's lips pressed tight, as if she'd been counting on this to become a scandal. The judge looked back at Paige's lawyer. Now, do you still wish to argue that this court cannot be fair? Page's attorney swallowed. Your Honor, at minimum we request— I'm going to do better than minimum, the judge cut in, still calm. I'm going to give both sides a chance to be heard on the record. And if you have a formal motion, file it. Today we're here on your emergency petition, and I'm not letting anyone use procedure as a weapon. That sentence landed like a weight, not because it was dramatic, because it was direction. He glanced at me again, not warmly, not coldly, just as a human being who'd walked into the wrong kind of spotlight. Ms. Morgan, he said, do you have counsel? Yes, Your Honor, my attorney said, standing beside me. Her name was Lila Chen. Sharp eyes, quiet voice, no interest in theatrics. The judge nodded. All right, then we proceed. Page's attorney launched into his petition like he was trying to outrun the judge's patience. Your Honor, this is a simple emergency request to protect the estate. The respondent unduly influenced the decedent, isolated her, and is now mismanaging assets. We request immediate removal of Ms. Morgan as executor, appointment of my client as interim administrator, and a freeze on all accounts. Freeze again, the word I'd been hearing in my head for weeks. But the judge didn't react to the word. He reacted to the lack of proof behind it. He held up one hand. Counsel, one at a time. You alleged undue influence. What is your evidence? Page's attorney blinked. We have statements from family members. Not family feelings, the judge said, still even. Evidence. Page's lawyer tried to pivot. We also have screenshots, text messages that show manipulation. The judge's eyes stayed steady. Screenshots can be cropped. Do you have originals with date and sender information? Page's attorney hesitated. Page couldn't stand it. She leaned forward and spoke, voice sweet but sharp. Your Honor, she stole Grandma from us. She controlled everything. The judge didn't flinch. He looked at her like she was a witness, not a princess. Ms. Pierce, he said, using her maiden name, your lawyer speaks for you. If you want to testify, you will do it under oath. Page's cheeks flushed. She sat back. My attorney stood. Your Honor, we have documentary proof that the decedent acted with independent counsel, and we have records contradicting the petitioner's narrative. The judge nodded once. Show me. Lila handed the clerk a thin stack. No binder, no drama, just 3 exhibits. The clerk carried them up. The judge read the first page, and his face changed slightly. Not shocked, just focused. This is a letter, he said. Yes, Lila replied, from Ms. Morgan's grandmother's estate attorney, dated months before her death. It confirms capacity, confirms independent meetings, and confirms the decedent's choice of executor. The judge scanned the signature and the letterhead like someone trained to recognize what's real. Then he read the line that made Page's lawyer shift in his chair. I met with Ms. Evelyn Morgan alone, the judge read aloud, and confirmed her intent without the presence of any family member. He looked up. Counsel for petitioner, do you dispute that this letter exists? Page's lawyer's voice tightened. We have not seen this. That's interesting, the judge said, because it's dated, signed, and the law firm's phone number is printed at the top. This is verifiable. He moved to Exhibit 2. This appears to be a facility record, he said. Lila nodded. Visitor log from the assisted living center. The petitioner claimed she visited daily. On the log shows otherwise. The judge's eyes tracked down a column of dates. Then he stopped on a month-long stretch with almost nothing. He tapped the page once. Petitioner. Page sat up. Yes? You told this court you were there every day, the judge said. This log shows you visited twice in 6 weeks. Page's mouth opened, then closed. Her lawyer tried to save her. Your Honor, visitor logs are imperfect. Maybe, the judge replied, but they're more reliable than a smirk. The room made a tiny sound at that, an involuntary breath, like everyone felt the floor shift. The judge moved to Exhibit 3 and frowned. This is a bank alert, he said. Lila's voice stayed steady. Yes, Your Honor. 2 separate attempted online logins to the estate account after the decedent's death. The bank sent security notifications to Morgan. Page's lawyer went still. My mother's hand gripped my father's sleeve in the gallery. Not comfort, warning. The judge looked up slowly. Ms. Morgan, did you authorize anyone to access the estate account? No, I said. Only me. He nodded once, then looked at Page's counsel. Did your client have access? Page's lawyer hesitated too long. Page blurted, That's ridiculous. The judge's voice stayed flat. Ridiculous is not an answer. He set the exhibits down, leaned toward the microphone, and said the words that made the hearing stop being about who looked believable. Clerk, he said, I want the bank's login audit trail subpoenaed today. Device identifiers, IP history, and timestamps for those attempted logins. I want the estate attorney who wrote this letter contacted for confirmation. And I want a sworn affidavit from the facility on the authenticity of this visitor log. He paused, then added one more sentence. Quiet, controlled, and absolutely lethal. And until I have that audit trail, no one is being removed, no one is being appointed, and no one is touching estate funds. Page's lawyer's face tightened like he'd just realized his emergency petition had done the opposite of what it was supposed to do, because instead of handing Page the estate, it had just put her under a microscope. When the judge said, subpoena, my sister's confidence didn't vanish. It hardened. Page leaned toward her lawyer and whispered fast, the way she did when she wanted control back. He didn't whisper back. He just stared at the bench like he was already doing damage control in his head. My parents sat behind her like statues. My mother's mouth was tight, the way it gets when she's calculating whether sympathy or anger works better in a room. My father kept his eyes on the judge's hands, not his face, like he was watching for the moment the pen moved. The judge didn't let the tension grow into theater. He kept it procedural. Counsel, he said to Page's lawyer, you requested an emergency freeze. The court will consider protective conditions, but only if you can show imminent harm. Do you have evidence of current misuse? Page's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, the respondent has refused to share information with the family. We have reason to believe— Reason is not evidence, the judge replied. Do you have a transaction? Page snapped. She's hiding money. The judge didn't look at her immediately. He looked at her lawyer. If your client wishes to speak, she may testify. Otherwise, counsel. Page's cheeks flushed. She sat back, jaw clenched. My attorney, Lila, leaned in slightly, voice calm. Your Honor, we're requesting the opposite of a freeze. We're requesting a limited protective order, no contact about the estate except through counsel, and a directive that the petitioner and her parents cease attempting account access. The judge nodded once. That may be appropriate. My mother made a small, scoffing sound behind Page. The judge's eyes cut toward the gallery for half a second. The scoff stopped. Then he did something that changed the room in a way no speech could. He asked the clerk for the call log. Clerk, he said, pull the court's communications record for this case. The clerk typed. A printer kicked on behind the desk. He's spitting out a thin page. The clerk handed it to the judge. He read silently, then looked up at Page's lawyer. Counsel, he said, your office called Chambers twice this week, requesting an off-calendar emergency order. Page's lawyer stiffened. Your Honor, we were concerned about asset dissipation. The judge's voice stayed flat. And you were told to file your request in writing like everyone else. Correct. Yes, the lawyer said, quieter. The judge nodded. So you tried to bypass the process. Page's lawyer opened his mouth, but nothing helpful came out. The judge leaned back slightly and looked at me. Ms. Morgan, he said, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Did you receive any pressure from your family to sign documents or hand over keys, access, or passwords? I didn't embellish. Yes, Your Honor. Page's head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. She's lying. The judge didn't react to the interruption. He addressed me. How? I took a breath. My parents demanded I add Paige as an authorized user on the estate account. When I refused, they said they'd make sure the court fixes it. Paige's lawyer shifted, uncomfortable. My mother's face turned sharp. That's not what we... The judge held up a hand toward the gallery without looking. Ma'am, do not speak. I continued calm. I also received messages warning me I'd be embarrassed in court if I didn't cooperate. The judge's eyes narrowed. Do you have those messages? Yes, I said, on my phone. Lila stood smoothly. Your Honor, we can provide screenshots with metadata after the hearing and, if required, the original device for verification. The judge nodded once. Do that. Paige's lawyer stood, trying to regain momentum. Your Honor, even if there were family disputes, that doesn't change the core issue, the respondent's undue influence. The judge looked at him like he'd already answered that. Then bring proof. He tapped the sealed declaration and the attorney letter with his pen. You have a sworn letter from independent counsel and a contemporaneous record. Your petition has allegations and secondhand statements. Paige's lawyer tried again. Your Honor, the declined card incident, this personal connection. The judge cut him off immediately, and his voice sharpened just enough to be unmistakable. Counsel, he said, do not attempt to insinuate bribery over breakfast. I disclosed the interaction. I documented the reimbursement. If you have a motion, file it. If you don't, I stop wasting the court's time. Paige's lawyer's face reddened. Understood. That was the second impact I hadn't expected. The judge shutting down the manipulation attempt before it could become a distraction. Then he turned to the one thing Paige couldn't charm. Clerk, he said, issue subpoenas today to Metro Union Bank for audit logs on attempted account access. Also subpoena the facility for certified visitor logs and contact the estate attorney for confirmation of the letter. He looked at Paige. Petitioner, until those records come in, you and your parents will have no access to the estate account, no contact with bank staff, and no contact with the executor about estate matters, except through counsel. My father's hand twitched in the gallery. My mother's face tightened like she wanted to stand up and argue, and then remembered the room wasn't theirs. Paige's lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, that's protective, the judge replied, because I have credible evidence someone attempted to access an account without authorization. He paused, then added the line that made Paige's skin go pale. And I have no tolerance for people trying to create emergencies by manufacturing narratives. Paige's breath caught. Then her lawyer leaned close and whispered something that made her eyes dart to my parents in panic. I didn't need to hear it to understand. If the bank logs showed her device, her IP, her login, the story wouldn't just collapse. It would follow her. The judge set a new hearing date. Clean and close. 2 weeks, same courtroom. Bring your evidence. The bailiff called, All rise. As we filed out, Paige's lawyer brushed past me too close on purpose and muttered, low enough that only I could hear, You know you can end this today. One signature, and we're done. I didn't stop walking, because I finally understood what I'd paid for at that diner. Not his breakfast. A moment of dignity that didn't ask for anything back. And now the person holding the gavel was the same man who had lived that moment. He wasn't going to reward me for it, but he was going to punish anyone who tried to weaponize the system against it. 2 weeks later, I walked back into the same courtroom with a different kind of calm. Not the calm you fake, the calm you earn after you've watched people try to bully paper and lose. My sister, Paige, was already there with her attorney in a fresh outfit that looked serious on purpose. My parents sat behind her again. Dressed like this was church. Polite faces, tight mouths, eyes that didn't quite meet mine. The judge entered, took his seat, and got straight to it. Counsel, he said, we're here because I ordered records, not stories. The clerk called the case. We stood. We sat. The judge looked down at a stack of documents on his bench, thin, stamped pages, the kind that don't care who you are in your family. "First," he said, "Metro Union Bank complied with the subpoena." Page's lawyer stiffened. My mother's hand tightened around her purse strap in the gallery, like she could stop the words by gripping something harder. The judge held up one page. "This is the login audit for the estate account. Device identifiers, IP history, timestamps, failed and attempted access." He looked at Page's attorney. "Counsel, you wanted urgency. When this is what urgency looks like, timestamps." Page's lawyer stood, trying to sound steady. "Your Honor, we have not had adequate time to review." "You've had 2 weeks," the judge replied. "Sit." He turned to the bank's compliance representative, who appeared on a small courtroom speakerphone. Her voice was crisp and bored in the best way, because boredom means routine, and routine means credibility. "Ma'am," the judge said, "state your name and roll for the record." "This is Andrea Mullen," she said, "Security and Fraud Compliance at Metro Union Bank." The judge nodded. "Ms. Mullen, explain what your audit shows in plain language." "Yes, Your Honor," she replied. "The estate account had multiple attempted logins after the decedent's death. The attempts were made using an email and password combination that was not the executor's. He in the system flagged them and blocked access." He asked, "Where did those attempts originate?" "2 sources," she said. "One from a home internet connection associated with the petitioner's parents' address. Another from a mobile device registered to the petitioner." A sound moved through the room, small, involuntary. Not gossip, physics. Page's lawyer's face went pale. My father's shoulders stiffened like he'd been slapped without being touched. My mother stared forward, expression locked, like if she didn't blink, this could become a dream she could wake up from. Page sat very still, eyes wide, breathing shallow. The judge didn't savor it. He asked the next question like he was building a ladder rung by rung. "Ms. Mullen," he said, "how do you determine registered to the petitioner?" "Device enrollment," she replied. "The phone number used for a 2-factor attempt matched the petitioner's number on file in our records from a previous interaction. The device also presented the same identifier we see on her prior authenticated sessions with the bank." Page's attorney stood again, voice tight. "Your Honor, that could mean her phone was lost," the judge finished without raising his voice. "Stolen, hacked, sure." He looked directly at Page. "Petitioner, did you report a stolen phone?" Page blinked. "No." "Did you report identity theft?" the judge asked. "No," she said again, smaller. The judge nodded once. "Then you're asking me to believe your device was used for an attempted login into an estate account you are trying to control and you took no action because—" "What? You didn't notice?" Page's jaw clenched, and her eyes flashed toward me like she wanted me to react so she could point and say, "See? She's unstable." I didn't move. My attorney, Lila, stood calmly. "Your Honor, we also submitted the text messages from Ms. Morgan's mother and father." The judge nodded. "Yes." He lifted another page from his bench. Not a screenshot this time. A certified printout with a verification affidavit from the phone provider, dates, sender numbers, and message content attached. He read one line aloud, flat. "Page's lawyer says you'll be embarrassed in court. Don't make this harder." Then he looked up at my parents. No anger, just clarity. "My court is not a tool for embarrassment," he said. "It's a place for evidence." My mother's mouth tightened as if she wanted to object to the concept of evidence itself. The judge continued. "Now." The facility also complied. He held up the visitor log affidavit, stamped, signed, clean. The assisted living administrator's statement confirmed the log's authenticity. Then he held up a third document, the estate attorney's sworn affidavit, plus a short letter confirming the earlier letter was real, signed and written after private capacity meetings. He turned to Page's attorney. "Counsel, do you have anything that contradicts any of this?" Page's lawyer's voice came out carefully controlled. Your Honor, we still contend the respondent isolated the decedent. The judge cut him off. The facility log contradicts that. The attorney affidavit contradicts that. The sealed declaration contradicts that. He leaned forward slightly. And the bank audit suggests someone on your side attempted access, he added. That is not a neutral dispute. That's interference. Page finally spoke, voice tight. Your Honor, my parents handled things. I didn't. The judge's gaze snapped to her. Stop. Page froze. If you want to testify, you will do it under oath, he said, and your counsel will stop letting you speak in fragments when the record is asking for full sentences. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the clerk's fingers pause on the keyboard. Then the judge did the most important thing he'd done so far. He narrowed the question until there was nowhere left to hide. Petitioner, he said, did you attempt to access the estate account? Page swallowed. Her eyes flicked to her lawyer. To my parents. Back to the bench. No, she said. The judge didn't react. He turned back to the speakerphone. Ms. Mullen, he asked, do you have the exact timestamps of the attempts? Yes, she replied. Read the time of the mobile device attempt. 2:41 a.m., 2 days after the decedent's death, Mullen said. The judge looked at Page. Where were you at 2:41 a.m. that night? Page's cheeks flushed. At home, asleep. The judge nodded slowly. And your phone was asleep, too. Her lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, this is turning criminal. It's turning factual, the judge replied. And if facts imply criminal conduct, that's not my doing. He set the bank audit down, picked up his pen, and spoke in the same measured tone he'd used since the moment he disclosed the diner incident. Here's what we're going to do, he said. The room tightened. First, the petitioner's emergency petition is denied in full, he said. No removal of executor. No appointment of petitioner. No control shift. That request is over. Page's breath caught. Second, the judge continued, I am issuing a protective order over this estate process. No contact with the bank by the petitioner or her parents. No attempts to access accounts. No helpful phone calls to staff. All communication goes through counsel. My mother's eyes went wide, offended at the concept of being told no by anyone who wasn't family. Third, he said, I am ordering the bank to maintain the current security hold configuration and to restrict device enrollment to the executor only. Mullen's voice came through the speakerphone. Understood, Your Honor. Fourth, the judge said, and his voice sharpened by 1 degree. I am ordering the petitioner to pay the respondent's attorney's fees associated with responding to this emergency petition. Page's lawyer stiffened. Your Honor, sit down, the judge said calmly. He looked down at the page again, then added, Fifth, I am referring the attempted account access to the appropriate authorities for review. My father's posture shifted, like he'd just realized the walls of the courtroom weren't made of air. Page whispered something to her lawyer, urgent, panicked. But the judge wasn't finished building the door. He turned to my parents in the gallery. This court is not adjudicating your family dynamic, he said, but I am putting you on notice. Any further interference, any calls, visits, or attempts to influence this estate will be treated as contempt. My mother's lips parted, then closed. Even she understood that word. The judge looked back at Page, and his voice softened just enough to sound human, not merciful. Petitioner, he said, you lost years chasing a story instead of telling the truth. That ends here. He signed the order, the clerk stamped it, and the sound of that stamp, dull and final, made Page flinch like it hurt. Then the judge looked at both attorneys. We will reconvene in 30 days for final distribution instructions, consistent with the decedent's documents, he said. If anyone violates these conditions before then, I will not entertain excuses. He glanced at me once, steady. Ms. Morgan, he said, keep doing what you've been doing. Stay factual. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. As we stood to leave, Paige's eyes finally met mine. Not smug, not furious, scared. Because she wasn't losing an argument anymore. She was losing access, and that's the only thing she'd ever wanted. 30 days later, I walked back into that courtroom with one goal: finish what Grandma started without letting anyone drag it into a circus. Paige was there again, but she looked different. Not humbled in a cinematic way, just tired. Her lawyer had a new folder, thicker, heavier, like he'd spent the month preparing for the worst-case scenario and didn't like what he found. My parents sat behind her, quieter than before. They didn't glance at me. They stared at the bench like the judge might still be negotiated with if they kept their faces blank. The judge came in, took his seat, and didn't waste time. "We have bank compliance records, facility records, an affidavit from a state counsel, and a sealed declaration from the decedent," he said. "This matter is not unresolved. It is documented." He looked at Paige's attorney first. "Counsel, are you proceeding with your petition?" Paige's lawyer stood slowly. "Your Honor, we are withdrawing the emergency petition." A small exhale moved through the room. Not relief, gravity. The judge nodded once. "Withdrawal is noted." Paige's jaw clenched as if the word tasted bitter. The judge didn't let it end with a quiet exit. He flipped to another page and spoke in the same calm voice he'd used all along. "Fees," he said. Paige's lawyer's shoulders tightened. My mother's posture stiffened behind him, like she'd forgotten fees are real when they're ordered. "Petitioner," the judge said, looking directly at Paige, "I ordered attorney's fees for the respondent associated with your emergency filing. The order remains. Payment is due within 10 days. Paige's face went pale. 10 days? "Yes," the judge replied. 10 days. Her lawyer tried to soften it. "Your Honor, we'd ask for a longer—" "No," the judge said flat. "The urgency was yours when you wanted control. Now the urgency is the court's when it corrects harm." He turned toward the clerk. "Clerk, include the bank audit and subpoena returns in the final record packet." Then he looked at my attorney. "Counsel for Ms. Morgan, do you have any remaining requests?" Lila stood, calm as ever. "Your Honor, we request one thing, a written directive that the petitioner and her parents are not to contact Metro Union Bank or the facility regarding estate matters, and that any future requests must go through counsel with notice to this court." The judge nodded immediately. "Granted." My mother's lips parted like she wanted to object, then closed again when she remembered where objections go when you're not counsel. The judge continued, "And because the bank audit indicates attempted access from both the petitioner's device and a connection associated with her parents' residence, the court's referral stands. That is not punitive. That is protective. It ensures this record is reviewed by the proper authority." Paige's lawyer didn't argue. He couldn't. The judge set the file down and said the final part like he was closing a door properly, not slamming it. "Distribution will proceed consistent with the decedent's documents," he said. "Executor remains. The protective conditions remain. And if anyone interferes again, the consequences will not be theoretical." He signed the order. The clerk stamped it. That dull stamp hit the room the way a lock hits the inside of a door. Paige didn't look at me when the hearing ended. She grabbed her purse like she wanted to disappear into the hallway before anyone could ask her to explain herself. But my parents couldn't move that fast. Outside the courtroom, my mother tried to step into my path anyway. Muscle memory, entitlement, the old belief that proximity equals authority. "Renee," she said, voice soft and wounded, "please." Lila moved half a step in front of me without touching her. "Ma'am, all estate communication goes through counsel now." My mother's eyes narrowed. "I'm not talking to the bank, I'm talking to my daughter." Lila's tone stayed even. "Not today." My father stood behind her, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. He didn't apologize. He didn't demand. He just said, "This is excessive." I looked at him for a moment and kept my voice low. You called me a thief for years, I said, and when the court asked for proof, you brought nothing but my sister's tone. His face twitched, like he wanted to deny it and couldn't find a clean way. My mother's eyes flashed. So you're just going to throw us away? I didn't raise my voice. You already did, I said, and then I walked past them. 2 weeks later, Metro Union Bank sent a formal letter to my attorney confirming the estate account security changes. Device enrollment, restricted to me only, 2-factor lock to my number, and a permanent do not honor note for any third-party requests without written authorization and verified callback. The letter wasn't emotional. It was perfect. That same week, Paige's fee payment hit our attorney trust account in full. One clean transfer, no memo, no excuses. Her lawyer asked for a receipt. Lila sent one line back. Received. 3 months later, a county investigator contacted Lila's office referencing the judge's referral and the bank's audit log. They didn't ask for a story. They asked for originals and timestamps. Paige hired separate counsel for that. My parents stopped calling entirely once a case number existed outside our family's control. And then the part that mattered most, the part Grandma would have cared about, happened quietly. The estate was distributed the way she wrote it. In no last-minute family meetings, no pressure signatures, no midnight logins, just paper, verified, enforced. I didn't feel triumphant when the final paperwork cleared. I felt settled. Because the best justice in a family like mine isn't watching someone suffer. It's watching the system stop rewarding their performance. One afternoon, months after it was all over, I stopped at that same diner again. Not because I wanted symbolism, because I liked their coffee and because the drive past it didn't make my hands shake anymore. The older man was there, sitting alone, eating quietly. He saw me, recognized me, and gave a small nod, not a thank you, not a scene, just acknowledgement. When I stood to leave, he said one sentence, low enough that nobody else could hear it. You did a kind thing, he said. It didn't buy you anything. That's why it mattered. I nodded once. I didn't do it to be owed. He held my gaze for a beat. Good. Then I walked out into the cold air and realized something I hadn't let myself say before. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. If your family chose a lie over you and came crawling back only when the system demanded proof, would you open the door again? Or would you let the record stand? Tell me what you'd do. And if you want more stories where evidence beats performance, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.